What's up, everybody? It's Syracuse basketball postgame. Once again, my name is Brent Axe. It's all presented by Krause Health. And we come to you live here after another, just agonizing has got to be the word if you're a Syracuse basketball fan at this point. They played their hearts out. They played close. They took it to overtime against one of the better teams in the ACC. But ultimately, Syracuse falls in the extra session. Final score, Wake Forest 77, Syracuse 74, and there's a lot to go over. What went down at the end of the game, the very, how can I put this, ridiculous officiating that we got from TV Teddy Valentine and his crew, which weighed way too far on the side of Wake Forest, and the counter to that right away. And I know you guys are going to be talking about that in the comments, and I'll respond and highlight some of your comments as we go through here. The counter to that is Wake Forest didn't make their free throws. The counter to that is Syracuse, in a key spot down the stretch, didn't make its free throws because hashtag free throws matter, right, friends? Frank Anselm with an opportunity there. The counter to that is Syracuse made one field goal in the overtime session. It was a much better wire-to-wire effort for the Orange. I mean, you look at that Miami game, right? And Syracuse lost by 1 point, but that was a slow but sure crumbling, right? Syracuse had an 18-point lead at one point in that game. They had a 14-point lead at halftime. Miami turns up the heat, turns up the pressure defense, and Syracuse kind of wilts as the second half goes along. That was not the case in this game until right at the end. Now, Wake Forest took it back a little bit in the second half. There were a lot of lead changes in this game, a total of 11 lead changes in this game. So Wake got back into this thing, and that's what you would expect a good team to do, right? So officiating, there's no question that it was a factor in this. Was it ultimately what led to Syracuse losing this game? I mean, Jesse Edwards fouled out, I believe, the quickest he's fouled out of a game this season, if not, certainly one of the 2 or 3 fastest games he's fouled out. A lot of questionable calls on Jesse from TV Teddy and his crew, but a couple that were, on him. And something that after a terrific game, his best overall game against Miami on Wednesday, he's got to know better in those situations. Another bad night offensively for Buddy Boeheim. And in these close situations where other people are scoring, Jimmy Boeheim actually led Syracuse with 21 points in this game. But if you have Buddy 2 consecutive games, not scoring, not shooting well for Syracuse, that's what's going to keep that other team close. And in that game, I think Syracuse's defense was a lot better in this game than it has. But again, in the key spot, I think a big question you got to ask, and as we speak here, Jim Boeheim has not hit the podium at the press conference, and we'll eventually get the answer to this, but why is Frank Anselm not in the game late down the stretch? Because Wake Forest just kept attacking Jimmy Boeheim at center. Jimmy Boeheim played well in a lot of ways. He did not play well there. Wake Forest knew it. They smelled blood in the water. They went right after Syracuse time after time. There's just so many little things that add up, but as they say it mostly in football, but certainly applied in this game in a lot of ways, a game of inches for Syracuse at Wake Forest. So the comments section is hot and heavy. I'm going to start highlighting some of what you guys are talking about here as we go along. But let's look at some numbers in this one here, just to kind of put it in context in a close game that goes to overtime. I think another big thing for the Orange was they were 8 of 29 from three-point range in this game, but Syracuse was 4 for 25 from three-point range after starting 4 of 4. So it looked like a day where Syracuse was really going to do well, shooting the ball from the outside, and they only end up with 8 on the game, 8 of 29. So I thought that was key. Syracuse shot 36% overall, 27 of 75 field goal attempts in an overtime game. Wake Forest ended up 25 of 58. That's 43%. Syracuse was great at the free throw line, yet they didn't get to the free throw line quite as much as Wake Forest did, which is a storyline in this game. But ultimately, Wake Forest didn't cash in their free throws because they were 64% from the free throw line. That's 16 of 25. Once again, this is a third straight game that Syracuse out-rebounded a team. And they just don't do that. 49-42 was the final in this one in terms of the rebounding, and it's the third straight game they've lost, which is just a fluke. Usually if Syracuse finds itself out-rebounding a team, which has been rare, but they've been hot there in that department. I think Cole Swider, what did he end up with? 14 boards on the day for Syracuse, but they lose ultimately. Points in the paint were even at 24. Syracuse had 16 assists on their 27 field goals. Wake had 19 assists on their 25 field goals. We mentioned Jimmy Boeheim led the way with 21 points. Buddy Boeheim with 17 points, but he was 5 of 20 shooting the ball. Hit a couple of threes, got to the free throw line, but not a good day for Buddy, even though he ends up being the second leading scorer on the team at this point. Alondas Williams, what a player he is for Wake Forest. The transfer from Oklahoma is a leading contender for ACC Player of the Year. He has 25 points to lead the way. Isaiah Mucius with 18 points for the Demon Deacons, who are now 10-0 at home. They're 13-3 overall. And here's something to discuss here, folks, as I'm sure you guys are already discussing in the comments, and I'll hop in there in a second here. We are in foreign territory. We have gone somewhere where Syracuse has boldly not gone in a long, long time. This is a losing basketball team now. Quite literally, they are 7-8, and that's what really stings about this loss for Syracuse. Not only the way it went down, but the position it put Syracuse in. They are now under 500, and they've got a few games coming up where maybe they can get the record improved. But where this really stings was that's a quad one win for Syracuse today. That would have been a quality, big-time ACC quad one win had they been able to pull this one off in Winston-Salem today, but that they did not. And as my colleague Mike Waters notes here, this is the latest in a season that Syracuse has found itself under 500 since the 1968-69 season. That's what we're looking at here in terms of big picture for Syracuse and a massive, massive hole they've got to dig themselves out of. Forget talking about the NCAA tournament at this juncture, folks. We're just talking about a team that's trying to finish above 500 at this point. That's the reality of it. Okay. A lot of comments coming in, so let's highlight what you guys are saying here. Official bottom feeding team now from Mark. Let's see. Brian thinks that Jimmy can play center on D against other centers. I mean, Wake Forest really went at him. Brian, this is always a determined way to lose. Mark says this is the worst team in 50-plus years. I mean, quite literally by record, it's the worst team in 50-plus years since 1968-69, right? Matt says here that Wake played a style that really could have led to a win, was surprised that they didn't pressure more. Yeah, Miami put a lot of pressure on Syracuse defensively Wednesday night. That didn't happen in this game. Al looks at this team, says they're completely disorganized at this point. Scott says this season has all the makings for a sliding door movie. So many what ifs and things that could have gone Syracuse's way. And that's got to be the agonizing thing. And I think that's why the word is appropriate there. They're not getting blown out. They're not losing by 20, 30 points. It's not inevitable, you know, in the middle of the first half, what's going to happen here. This was a back and forth game for so long. This game reminded me of, go back to the Virginia game a couple games ago, where Virginia, no matter what Syracuse did, had an answer, right? They'd come down and score. They'd go on an 8-0 run to answer a run from Syracuse all game long. For a lot of this game, that was Syracuse answering Wake Forest. You know, it ended up being 11 lead changes, but there was a while where Syracuse was holding off some Wake Forest runs, would score, would respond, would run a crisp offensive set. Looked like this is as good as Syracuse has looked all year. But again, it's those plays they missed at the end, the Frank Anselm free throws, Frank not being in the game, only scoring one field goal in overtime. I mean, go through it. Let's discuss the officiating a little bit here, and I'll continue to look through some of your comments as we do it. Look, the officiating was a joke. There's no question about it. If TV Teddy and his crew is going to blow the whistle, as much as they're going to blow the whistle, fine. But it's got to be called on both sides. You cannot tell me that it was that much weighted Syracuse's side. Now, again, Jesse made a couple of bad plays. There were some fouls that no matter who's out there reffing, you got to blow the whistle. You got to call them. But you're talking about 21 fouls on Syracuse and 11 for Wake Forest. That doesn't make any sense. If it's weighted, I don't know, 17-11 or something in that nature, I guess I can live with that because there were some bad calls. But man, TV Teddy and his crew were so frustrating because how can there were times, every time Wake Forest had the ball, there'd be a foul call. There'd be a whistle. Like every possession down the stretch of the second half before this game went to overtime. It was a joke. And there's a reason they call him TV Teddy, folks. There's another play, speaking of which, the review at the end Buddy Boeheim was fouled on that. Now, the ball, they couldn't come to conclusive evidence. They looked at the replay. It's not a lot of camera angles. It's a Yes Network broadcast, so it's not like you got an ESPN high-level broadcast, a lot of cameras. It looked like it went off Walton for Wake Forest. But you know what? In that case, Buddy was fouled. We're talking about the play. Syracuse ends up turning the ball over about 10 seconds to go. They turned it over because of a bad inbounds play, but Buddy was fouled on that play. So TV Teddy's crew gets an F for this one, for what we're talking about here in terms of how weighted it was towards Wake Forest, some of the calls that they make. Again, Jesse Edwards is not completely absolved of blame here, but certainly he fouls out in 20 minutes. And that was TV. The last one, by the way, was more Joe Girard's fault than it was Jesse Edwards' fault in this case. So very, very frustrating in that instance. Mike says, let's face it, this isn't a good shooting team from the floor from three. Brian says, why can't we isolate and pass when two defenders? Easier if you can pass to Jesse, if not executed by the refs. Jordan just gets right to the heart of the matter here. This is the worst SU team I've seen in my lifetime. John says it's hard to watch this team at this point. Jeff, with a comment here, Williams reminded me of Carmelo, and that, of course, is Benny Williams. I mean, if you could take a little bit of a positive out of this game, I think Benny is getting better and better. I think Benny's confidence is showing. He had a couple of nice baseline shots in this one. He was playing late in the game, and, Jesse's foul trouble had Boeheim shifting the lineup around a little bit there. I think Benny is so close to breaking out here. Now, if Benny's going to crack the lineup, he's got to be in for either Cole or Jimmy, typically, right? Unless, you can, mess around with the lineups a little bit and they can be out there at the same time. Cole had 14 rebounds in this game, and Jimmy was your leading scorer. Now, again, Jimmy shouldn't have been in there at center late in the game because, Wake Forest just went at him and got in there easily, right? So you're sacrificing offense for defense. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul in that situation, right? But, man, I continue to be impressed by Benny Williams and the kind of player he can be. Not next year. A lot of people are talking about next year, right? I meant today. I meant what we're seeing in the here and now. He is that close to getting it, to breaking through, and I think he could be a real breakthrough player. Not next year. I think this year he could have that breakthrough player status for Syracuse if he plays his cards right in this one. Just thought I'd mention it. Some of you will get mad at me for noting this. Somebody got really mad at me for talking about this on Orange Weekly on Thursday, but some of you have mentioned this already here as the comments go. Kadari Richmond had 27 points for Seton Hall today, 25 of 27 points in the second half. Seton Hall, huge win over UConn today. Just thought I'd mention that if you're wondering what the former Orange guard is up to. And Corey here notes it, seeing a lot of comments about Richmond. He had a great game today, but look at his stats. They're about the same as he had while at Syracuse, about 6.9 points per game, 23 minutes this year versus 6.3 points in 21 minutes last year. And I think part of that is, Corey, he's on a guard-rich team. He starts, he gets time, but he's, it's a lot more crowded in that situation. Whereas here, he'd be going up against, Joe Girard and Symir Torrance. And I think he's better players than those two overall. There's certainly things that Joe and Symir bring to the table that Syracuse needs. But look, que sera, whatever will be. He's gone. There's nothing you can do about it now. But, that was interesting that Kadari Richmond exploded today in a big game. That's a huge win for Seton Hall over UConn today. Let's see. Yeah, Scott notes it here. Somebody asked about Barama Sidibe. He's just not ready. He played a little bit in the Brown Cornell stretch there at the end of the season, but he's just can't run up and down the floor. That knee situation there, you brought it up in your comment there, Scott, with stamina. So if you're wondering about that, yeah, like emergency desperation, maybe, but in a game like this, to throw him out there cold, I think you're hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself in that case. And that's a shame because, man, I hate to see Barama injured again. Hopefully he can get healthy and can help this team at some point before it's all said and done. Because he came back. And used that extra year of eligibility and then got hurt again at this point. Alex says a better defensive effort today. Defense is going to be critical if they're going to stay over 500. That's really it. That's the name of the game. And today they made some better defensive plays. Again, TV Teddy and the crew kind of throw a monkey wrench in that whole thing. But to keep the game it was a lot of offensive answers and hitting shots and answering Wake Forest what they did offensively, but this did not look like a disorganized team on defense. Now, look, Wake hit some open shots. They hit some deep, deep threes, and you're just going to get open looks against the zone. That's just the way it works. But I did not see, like, compare it to what Miami did to Syracuse on Wednesday and how they just kind of wilted and fell apart. I didn't think we saw that in this game. They're not even close to what we get in terms of a functioning average defensive team right now, but that's where they got to get if this team's going to have a chance, because their offense is keeping them in games. You almost beat one of the better teams in the ACC today. You almost beat Miami on Wednesday. You almost beat Virginia before that. Like, they're right there. And the one thing that would make this a team above 500 would be just a functioning average defense. You don't even have to be a good defensive team. You just got to make stops whenever they can. Mark says, come on, Brent. Edwards gets an earful from JB when he comes to the bench, but his boys never catch any flack. If I'm Edwards, Ansel, and Benny, I'm looking to leave. Why play for a coach who clearly plays favorites? Benny's already stated he's not going to leave. He's already been flat out asked about entering the transfer portal, and he has said, I mean, if he sticks to his word, he said this in a radio interview recently, that he's going to stick here. He's going to stick it out. He likes the coaching staff. He likes being here. The other players, I mean, the transfer portal is always sitting there if you don't feel like the role is going to be there. And, I mean, if you think he's going to yell at Jimmy and Buddy as much as he yells at these other players, I mean, we all knew that wasn't going to be the case, right? He does. I mean, I've seen him get into it with both of those guys. But the thing with Jesse is what always draws Boeheim's ire is out of position on defense. And there's a lot of times where Jesse's getting a lot better. Just look at Wednesday's game. But there's a lot of times where he's out of position, and that draws Boeheim's ire. Here's the thing, though. When you're making the center chase the corner as much as you do in that zone, I mean, there's only so much Jesse can do there as long as he is, right? He had a nice block in the corner today. But, you know, if you think Jim Boeheim, and I'm not saying you're wrong or right to think this, I'm just telling you, if you think he's going to treat every player equally, no, that ain't going to happen, friends. Rob says, losing is disappointing, but this team fights. Better defense today, not as many turnovers. It's not over yet. Keep the faith. Orange Nation. Rob trying to keep the faith. But, honestly, keep the faith for what? This is not an NCAA tournament team. I think we can definitively say here on January the 8th, that this team is not going to make the NCAA tournament. Now, if I'm wrong about that, you guys circle back in a couple of months and remind me about that. Hashtag, or what's that Twitter feed? Freezing cold takes, right? Circle back and tell me if I'm wrong about that. But the latest record that Syracuse has had in terms of this point of the season and still made the tournament was 10-4. And by the way, that was last year, right? This is a 7-8 basketball team that has no quality wins, that has two terrible losses on the schedule, Colgate and Georgetown, and can't play a functioning defense right now. They're fighting to stay above 500 is what they're fighting for now. This is not an NCAA tournament team. And if they go on an all-time heater and prove me wrong, great. I'd rather talk about and write about an NCAA tournament team, as you would. I want to see a team play in the tournament. But what have they proven to be anywhere near that conversation? I think we know that's the thing. So when Rob says keep the faith, Rob, if you're still in here, follow up here. Keep the faith for what? I guess to stay above 500, just watch the team, support your team. That's fine. If you guys are fans and you want to support the team, but I don't know what you need an end game. You need an end goal, right? At least that team last year and every team prior to that in the last 5 or 6 years has been in the conversation for the tournament until the end. They made some, they didn't make some. And more often than not, when Syracuse gets in the tournament, they will validate that invitation and make a run. They're not making the tournament this year. So they're just kind of playing for what at this point? Now, they're not going to think that, of course, because they've got, 15 games to go here in the season. But reality sets in here that this is going to be the earliest that we have seen a Syracuse team that we know is not making the tournament since 2015. And remember, there were unique circumstances for that because they took themselves out of the tournament because of the impending sanctions that were coming. That team wasn't making the tournament anyway. The Rakeem Christmas Senior Tour, he was great that year, but that was an 18-13 team that wasn't going to make the tournament as it was. Rob asks here, is FSU no longer seen as a key win? It depends on what their net ranking ends up being. And remember, they play Florida State again. So they play Florida State again, and I'm not sure that's going to end up being a quad one game. So there's only about 4 or 5 as it is quad one opportunities left on the schedule at this point, and 2 of them are Duke. So yowza, good luck with that. Jeff, I got to sneak this one in here because I agree with you. Thankfully, lacrosse season is coming. A very exciting lacrosse season coming up, friends. I think we could have 2 Final Four teams from both the men's and women's side today, but more to come on that as we get closer. Mark says this team's been bubble or worse every year since 2013. And what is the constant there? Obviously, I've soured on Boeheim as a coach, loved him in the 80s to 2000s, but lately this team frustrates me more than produces. The constant there is the ACC. The constant there is they went into a different league, and it's been a much, much tougher go of it since then at this point. Jamie says just hoping for player development at this point, and that the new guys coming in next year end up being studs at this point. Paul says worst officiated game ever. The worst officiated game ever in terms of Syracuse was that Ohio State Elite Eight game. It was at 2012. Good God, that was, I can't even put into words how bad it was. that NCAA tournament game where, an Elite Eight game, mind you, against Ohio State. So that was the worst game ever. I'd put this one up there pretty high on the list, though, right? I mean, if you're going to call it even. And Boeheim was screaming it at the refs, and I was screaming it at the refs because I want to see a fair game. If you're going to, there's no way Syracuse committed that many more fouls than Wake Forest. I just refuse to believe that. So just call it even, right? Just call it even at that point. Nate Oates. There's Mike with the reference to that game. Oh, goodness. Yeah, TV Teddy, right, Jason? TV Teddy, folks. Every time there's, it's not quite on the level of some of you old school fans remember, Tim Higgins. Anytime Tim Higgins was there, he just kind of groaned and like, oh God, here we go. I thought John Cal was a pretty decent referee, but he could have his bad nights. Jimmy Burr. Oh, of the 3, I mean, Higgins was kind of the headliner, but Jimmy Burr was the worst. Just the worst. You just knew you were in for it. So TV Teddy's like the last one standing where you kind of groan and you know the name. But we know your name. The best officials are the ones that show up and you're like, who's that guy? Right? Because they're probably doing their job. We know Pat Driscoll, of course, because he's a Central New York boy, Bishop Ludden Hall of Famer. Shout out to him there. And Pat's a great ref, but he can't officiate Syracuse games because of the regional thing there. Wish he could, because he's a great ref, and I would love to see him do it. All right, so what's up ahead for Syracuse here now? We talked about what's left to play for. They stayed on the road, went to Miami, stayed in Miami Wednesday night, went to Wake, spent a couple of days there. They now get to come home. They will play Pittsburgh on Tuesday night. And see, the problem with Pittsburgh is there's nothing to be gained there. Pittsburgh's terrible. They're 5-9 on the season. If you beat them, it gains you nothing but a win, and you're 8-8, right? So for the morale of the team and the fans and, what the record looks like. But if you somehow lose that game, you want to talk about a terrible, terrible pop on the resume. But again, why even talk about the NCAA tournament resume? It's in a tournament team. But that's obviously you want to get back on track and win a game and get to 8-8. Syracuse already beat Florida State earlier this year, and that one's hovering around a quad one win. Florida State on Saturday, January 15th, next Saturday, that's not a quad one game because it's a home game. And Florida State will not fall between 1 and 30 in the net ranking. So it's a quad two opportunity for Syracuse. It's a chance to sweep Florida State and add somewhat of a quality win on the schedule. But it won't be a quad one opportunity. And then Syracuse will host Clemson on Tuesday, the 18th. And Clemson is going to be a tough go for the Orange. So the good news is they get 3 in a row at home. The bad news is there's not a lot of opportunities there for Syracuse in terms of its resume. But, you got to come out of that winning 2 out of 3. You got to come out of that winning 2 out of 3 and get your head above the 500 line at this point. So that's the kind of conversations we're having right now. And that is certainly something that Syracuse fans are not used to. And I'm sure we will handle this all rationally without emotion, right? That this could be an under 500 basketball team or a 500 basketball team. And that has never happened in 46 years under Jim Boeheim. It's amazing to think about, right? As Brian notes here, their resume is destroyed at this point. Jamie says, just win when I take my kids to Pitt for the game. That's all we can ask for, right? It's like a cameo video. You make an individual request. Just win for me, please, when we go to the game on the 25th. You brought up Buddy, though. So we went over the stats earlier. Buddy had 17 points, but he was 5 of 20 shooting. He was 2 of 9 from three-point range, got a few at the free throw line, 7 rebounds, 6 assists for Buddy, too. So, I mean, he found ways to contribute and help out here, play 44 minutes in this game. But he's coming off a bad night against Miami on Wednesday, and it is just going to be a tough go for this kid to get open shots, to get quality looks, to really help this team. I mean, he grinded out there. I mean, the Boeheims were the 2 leading scorers in this game, but man, the way he's shooting and the trouble he's going to have getting open looks, that's the formula, and the formula is working. Every team that plays Syracuse is going to be like, look, we're just not going to give him an easy time, and we'll take our chances with the rest of that crew. You know, Cole Swider went 4 of 10 shooting. He had 14 rebounds, but he went 4 of 10 shooting. He was 6 of 9 from three-point range in the last game. Gerard, started hot, but fizzled out. 3 of 12, 2 of 9 from three-point range, hit a 5 of 5 at the free throw line, dished out 7 assists. So he kind of balanced out what he usually does not provide there. It's usually not a high assist rate for Joe, but Buddy's the engine. And if you just don't get an overwhelming performance from the other scorers, this is what you're going to end up with, these close games where teams kind of squeak it out. That has been the pattern we've seen in the past few games here. But to expect Buddy Boeheim to break out at any point here, it's going to be tough because teams just throw everything at him and take their chances with the rest of this roster at this point. What do you say we end it there for tonight, friends? It's going to be a busy stretch coming up, as we mentioned. 3 straight home games for the Orange. Our next meeting here will be Tuesday night. It's a 7 o'clock tip time at the Carrier Dome. Start of 3 in a row at the Dome, as we mentioned. Pitt first, Florida State next Saturday, and then the 18th they will face Clemson. So the Orange below 500, and how they fight their way out of that is going to be something to watch here, because this team is giving it all they got, and they're still falling short, and it's only January 8th, folks. This team, they keep having to play like this, they're just going to collapse at some point. So they desperately need a win for morale. They desperately need a win for record. They desperately need a win just to get, this thing back on track here. But as we stand today, friends, it's going to be tough to forecast this team playing in the NCAA tournament. Maybe that dream died in Winston-Salem tonight, barring one heck of a run here by the Orange, which is going to be difficult one way or the other. So you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll meet again Tuesday night right here, Syracuse Orange Facebook page live, Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube live. If you ever missed this show, by the way, just a reminder that the YouTube clip is up on YouTube. You can find it on our social media channels, and I pop it in my recap on syracuse.com. Hope you guys can read that. All of our great coverage coming your way tonight and Sunday on syracuse.com. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for watching. As always, thanks to our friends at Krause Health, and we'll talk to you again on Tuesday night.